Hello guys. So sorry that I'm out today. I know it's not the ideal date, but Riley's sick, so I have to stay home with him. You should have this in front of you, the winter benchmark practice. So the day of the final, you're taking our final and this benchmark. So I want to prepare you for this benchmark. I should mention also that the extra credit trackers that everyone has, those are turned in the day of the final. And I'm also creating an additional winter or a practice final. I know that we already did one where you had to bubble in the answers, so I gave you a second one, and that is optional. You don't have to do it. If you do decide to do it, then you get another 5 points of extra credit, and I have the answers included with that printout, although it's not bubbles, it's just a bunch of letters, but there are answers. All right, with that, let's go ahead and practice the winter benchmark. So there are 15 questions, as you can clearly see. Let's do number 1. So we're supposed to enter the value of x that makes the equation true. And what I'd like you to do is try to do all of these on your own and then unpause the video to see what the answer is. So go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, so you've unpaused the video. In order to solve for x, I need to get rid of this 12 in front of the x. I have to divide by 12 because 12 is being multiplied by x. So divide both sides by 12, divide both sides by 12, and I get x is equal to 3 over 12, and if I reduce that fraction, I can reduce that fraction by dividing the top by 3, dividing the bottom by 3, the numerator and denominator by 3, and I'm left with my new fraction of 1 over 4, which is the final answer. Alright, we're on to number 2. So again, pause the video, try it out, and you unpause the video. So on this one, all I have to do is add 3 to both sides. So I add 3, and I get 14 is less than n. And that's all there is to it. A little bit weird for a box. Alright, let's try number 3. Pause the video. Alright, and you've unpaused the video. So for this one, it's a little bit tricky because we want to solve for d, which means we have to get rid of this negative 12. And right now this negative 12 is being multiplied by d, so the inverse operation of multiply is divide. So divide by negative 12, divide by negative 12. Oh, but I'm dividing by a negative. Whenever I multiply or divide by a negative, something happens to the sign. Do you remember? Yeah, that's right. It flips. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative, it flips the sign. So after I divide both sides by negative 12, that negative 12 cancels out, and I'm left with d by itself. This is a greater than or equal to, so now it flips to a less than or equal to, and I do a negative 6 divided by a negative 12. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I have a positive 6 over 12. And this reduces because I can divide the top and bottom by 6 by 6. So now I have the final formula, which is d is less than or equal to 1/2. D is less than or equal to 1/2, so the correct answer is C. Alright, so we're on to number 4. Again, pause the video, try this one out on your own, and then unpause the video. Alright, so there are 221 students on the field trip, and so there are 5 students that are riding in the van. So this is like a constant, so there's 5 here. 5 students on a van, and then the rest on the buses. So I basically just subtract the 5 and then figure out how many to fill on those 6 buses. That's the general idea for this one. So we need to find an equation that can be solved for S. S is students, so there's our variable on each bus. Okay, well I know that I need to somehow get that all equal to 221. So I'm going to put that equals 221. So if I count the number of students over here, it should be equal to 221. Well, I know that there's 5 students on the van, so let's just write that. Does that need to be multiplied by students? Not really, because I'm not doing multiple vans. Remember, whenever you have multiply, that means you have multiple of that. But I do have multiple buses, and that means that we're going to be multiplying our S by 6. So I need to add this 6 times S, and that's my best attempt at an S. And that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to first subtract 5, and then I'm going to divide by 6. So first I enter the equation, so I just did that. Let's check off that first step. Now I need to enter the number of students that are on each bus. So I basically need to solve this equation. So here I go, solving the equation. I'm going to subtract 5 minus 5 minus 5, and I'm left with just this 6s, oh gosh, the lag, 6s, that's canceled out, is equal to, when I subtract 5, that is 200 and, what is that, 16? 216, and now I need to divide both sides by 6 to get rid of that 6, so divide by 6, and that'll cancel out the 6, divide by 6, and then I get my final answer, and I ran out of room, I'm going to do it over here on the left hand side. That means S is equal to 216 divided by 6. I'm not sure if you'll have a calculator on the benchmark or not. I think you do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you do have a calculator, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. So 216 divided by 6, and I get 36. So there are 36 students on each bus. All right, number 5. So we've actually never done problems like number 5, but yeah, so you're just going to skip this one. I'll show you how to do it briefly, but yeah, there's not much I can say about this one because we haven't learned this yet, and that's fine. This isn't going to go in Aries or anything for number 5. These other problems will be scored and go into Aries. But if you want to think about number 5, and we haven't learned slopes yet, but I have a negative slope, this negative number in front of the x, which means I have a negative slope. It goes, like if I have a ball here, it rolls down. That means that it's a negative slope. So this is the line of negative 2/5 x plus 4, and then this must be the other line, 5x plus 2. So just being able to distinguish them, this says it's always greater than that negative 2/5, so the shaded part needs to be above. This is also greater than, so the greater than means that the shaded part should be above. You're just looking for the graph that matches it correctly. So essentially, since these are both greater thans, both of them need to be shaded above the line. And you can see that the difference between these graphs is that, oh, and then dashed versus dotted, and you have this little tip on the closet in that corner next to all of those Greek symbols, where if you have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, it's a solid line, I can't speak, and a less than or a greater than is a dashed line. So you'll notice that this one is going to be dashed, and this one is going to be solid. So we need a solid line for the negative slope. This one is dashed, so it's not A. This one is solid, and this one is dashed, so that's probably the correct answer there. And then all of them are shaded the exact same way. So this one is just asking what's the difference between solid and dashed line. And you need to know that the positive slope, the one that has a very steep slope, has a dashed line. And again, if you miss this one, I'm not going to take points off on the benchmark. All right, number 6. This one you do know how to solve, so go ahead and pause the video now and try it out. All right, so you've unpaused the video. We need to find an ordered pair that is a solution represented by this graph. So this is a fancy way of saying which of these points are on this line. Well, 4, 0 is right there, so immediately the answer is A. Let's see why the answer is not 2, 3. If I come to 2, 3, 1, 2, come up 3, you'll see that this point is not quite on the line. 5, 0 is right here, and 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 is right there. Those other 3 points aren't quite on the line, but 4, 0 is on the line. That is a solution. Remember, this line represents the infinite number of solutions to an equation. So any point on that line is a solution. All right, next page. Again, number 7. I don't expect you to be able to solve these, but I will go through it just in case you want to see if you can get this one correct in the benchmark. So feel free to skip this in the video. So how do you determine which line is which? Well, again, you can just go by the slopes if you want, or you can go by the y-intercepts. This is the y-intercept, so it's where it intersects the y-axis right here. So you can say, oh, this one is 3, which matches with the 3. So maybe you want to do it that way, or maybe you want to say, well, that's a positive number, which means if I roll a ball, it'll have to go uphill, which means it's a positive slope. And therefore this one is a negative slope. If I have a ball right here, it'll roll down, therefore it's negative slope, which matches with this graph. So either way, you can distinguish the lines, and then you know that what's the key difference here? Which one is dashed, which one is dotted. So you know that this one should be solid, so the one that intersects at 3 with a positive slope should be a solid line, which means it's not B and it's not D. Both of those were dashed lines. So it's between C and A. And you know that for the intersection point at 3, so this line right here, it needs to be below it because it's a less than. Is the gray area below it? It is there. Let's check C. Is the gray area below it? Oh no, the gray area is above this line. It was above this line. So it's not C. It should have been below. So the correct answer, I guess I'll keep that cross off. The correct answer is A. All right. Let's take a look at number 8. All right, number 8 is difficult, but I think you guys can solve it. It just takes a little bit of work. So go ahead and pause the video now, see if you can get this one. All right, so you've unpaused the video. So this models how much gas is in the gas tank. And you'll think about the real world, you'll probably start with almost a full tank of gas, and eventually the gas will get lower and lower, and that's kind of what happens. So this point right here represents when I have a full tank of gas, and this is when I run out of gas. Okay, so we need to determine which one of these is true. The maximum amount of gas in the tank was 60 ounces. Well, I see 60 right here, so maybe I can see this is true, but that's in time. That's 60 minutes. So this is asking for 60 ounces. That's not quite true. This ounces, OZ represents ounces, so it's actually talking about the left-hand side. So the maximum amount in the gas tank is actually right here at 30. It's the highest point here. So if this was a 30, that would be correct, but it's 60, so that's actually false. The amount of gas in the gas tank is at a maximum at 0 minutes. Well, let's go to 0 minutes. Let's look at 0 minutes right here. 0 minutes, well, here's minutes. If I go 0, that's here, and that means I am up here at 30 ounces. So at time equals 0, I'm right here on the graph, and it's saying, is that the maximum amount of gas? Well, is there any other point on this graph that is higher than this point? Well, this point is lower, this point is lower, so there's no other point higher than this, therefore this is a maximum. So the correct answer here is, that's true. There's no other point higher than that point. And then the gas tank will be empty after 60 minutes, and that makes sense, right? So minutes, 60, so 60 minutes is talking about this point right here in the graph. It's saying that the tank will be empty, or there are 0 ounces of gas. And look over here on the left. This is ounces of gas. This is the value of 0, and that is exactly the y value of this graph. So this one is also true. All right. Go ahead and pause the video now. Give number 9 a shot. All right. You've unpaused the video. So we need to write down the basic information that this problem gives us. So Bob, I'm just going to represent Bob with a B. So Bob can make 7 leashes in 2 hours, 7 over 2. And Nina, I'm going to do Nina as an N, can make 4 leashes in 1 hour. Nina can make 4 leashes in 1 hour. And we need to enter an equation to find the number of hours it'll take them to make 60 leashes. All right. So we know that they're going to be added up, something plus something. So I'll say something there plus something there, and we know that it's eventually going to be equal to 60. We need to somehow get 60 leashes. And we know that we're going to have a variable t in there somewhere. And then eventually we need to solve t. So this one is saying find the equation, this one is saying solve the equation. So finding the equation, I'm pretty sure it's straightforward. You just say 7 halves t. So it's going to be 7 halves, and I'll do the variable t in a sec, plus 4 over 1. And then make sure that you have your variable in there. Your variable is t. So this rate plus this rate is equal to 60. All right, so if I actually solve this equation now, I need to somehow combine these two. So I need to add these fractions, and this is a little bit difficult, but I think we can see it. So in order to add these, I have to have common denominators. And let me rewrite these in a slightly different way. This is the same fraction, I just wrote it a little bit differently. 7 over 2 plus, let me write this as 4 over 1, and I'm going to put t in the numerator. Whenever you multiply by a variable, you can always put that in the numerator, t. Well, notice here that we don't have like denominators. These bottom numbers are not the same. How can we get the bottom numbers the same? And you're right, we can multiply the right-hand fraction by 2 over 2. If we do that, then we'll have 8t over 1. So let's go ahead and just scribble that out. Right, 8t over 1. So this is, when I multiply, I get 8t over 2. I don't know what I'm saying here. So now I can add 8t over 2 with 7t over 2 because they have common denominators. Now I can add them, so 7t plus 8t is 15t. So when I add those two fractions, I get 15t over 2, and that's set equal to 60. And now I need to solve this equation. I guess I should do a little arrow here. So I need to solve this equation. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, multiply this side by 2, multiply this side by 2, because right now it was being divided by 2. That'll get rid of the 2 down here, and I'll just be left with the 15t. So now I have 15t is equal to 120, and then from there I'm going to divide by 15. So divide by 15, divide by 15, and I get t by itself because those 15s cancel out. Those 15s cancel out like that. T is equal to 120 divided by 15, which is 8, I think. Let me check. 120 divided by 15, it is 8. So it takes them 8 hours to make leashes together. Alright, we're on to number 10. So we need to figure out which of these equation matches which of these tables. So essentially I need to plug in a number into our equation to see if that is the value that I'm looking for. And the trick for whenever you're doing these types of problems is to plug in the easiest number. The easiest number to plug in is 0, because 0 times anything is 0. So let's plug in 0 and see what happens to our equation. If I plug in 0 here, so 0 goes in for x, that means negative 4 times 0 is 0. That whole term goes away. And I'm left with negative 1/4. Well, negative 1/4, when negatives kiss, they become positive. So it's a positive there, positive there. So the answer is positive 1/4. Which of these tables has positive 1/4 when I plug in 0? It's table B. So let's come back here, get rid of all that work. Table B. Because I plugged in 0. Let's plug in 0 to this one. Are you ready? When I plug in 0, that means this whole term goes away, and I'm left with positive negative 1/4, or just negative 1/4. So which of these is negative 1/4? It's table C. And when I plug in 0 yet again, plug in 0, this whole term with the x goes away, because again I would have 4 times 0, which is 0, so it's 0 plus 3/4. 0 plus 3/4 is 3/4, so I have table A. Alright, let's move on to number 11. This one we haven't learned yet, so it's one of those that I would normally skip for the video solutions, but I'll just say that you can skip it in the video because you don't need to know it, but if you do get it correct on the test or on the benchmark, then that looks really cool, but I'm not going to be grading this one. I'm not going to be putting this one into Aries. So I need to use this equation to answer the question. So I need to match some key features. So when I factor out a 3 like this, so if I multiply these 3's back in, you'll see that I get the same equation that I started with. So this is called factoring out when I pull out the 3, and we've seen this a little bit before. But whenever you do that and you have something in parentheses with your x, it highlights an x-intercept. So these are both y-intercepts. So whenever you have this in parentheses for x plus 2, it's showing you where the x-intercept is. So, and it's one of these. And the other trick that you have to know, which we will eventually learn, is whenever you're inside the parentheses, it's the opposite of what you think it is. If it's plus 2, then the answer is minus 2. when it's on the outside of the parentheses, it's normal. Like if it was plus 2 on the outside, then it would be a y-intercept of plus 2. This one is inside, so it's an x-intercept of minus 2. The correct answer is C. All right, moving on to number 12. Number 12 is another one of those that we have never seen before. And this one is really hard to do if you haven't seen before. So again, you can skip this one in the video, but if you want to learn how to do this, stick around. So what does this thing mean right here? This is trying to say that the first number in the sequence is 8. The first number in the sequence is 8. So let's write it down, 8. After I have that, this is saying the rule is, so let me write that, 8, and the rule is the next term is equal to the previous term plus 2. So take the previous term and then just add 2 to it. So really all you're looking for is that second part over here, plus 2. Okay, well, let's add 2. Plus 2 is 10. Plus 2, 12. Plus 2, 14. And there's my sequence of numbers. All right, then from there, I have to go backwards to find what happens for remember this is the first term, the second term, the third term, the fourth term, but what is the 0th term? Well, I just have to go backwards. If I'm adding 2, then I subtract 2. My 0th term is 6. Okay, let's do the same process over. So my first term is 8, so my first term is 8 again, and now I'm subtracting 2. So 8 minus 2 is 6, minus 2 is 4, minus 2 is 2. How do we get to that 0th term? Well, you do the opposite. To find this number right here, instead of subtracting 2, you add 2, and you get 10. And then finally, this term right here, we start at 9. So I'm going to start here at 9, and it says subtract 3 from that term. So subtract 3, and you get 6. Subtract 3, you get 3. Subtract 3, you get 0. How do I find this 0th term? Well, instead of subtracting 3, I add 3. Add 3 to get 12. Now I have the sequence of numbers. You always have to start at 0 with the 0th term. All right, the 0th term is going to be the number out here on the side. So is it number 6, 10? What's that 0th number? Those are all your 0th numbers. And you'll see, okay, well, the 0th number is 6. That matches this one. So that matches the first one that we did. The 0th number of 10, that matches the second one that we did. We just kind of did them in order. And the third one that we did, this one where we subtracted 3, this green sequence right here, that was this one right here. So it just happened to be the diagonals in this case. All right, number 13. This one you should be able to do because we've done lots of word problems before. So go ahead and pause the video now. Try this one out on your own. All right, you've unpaused the video. So we have to enter an equation to find the number of visits. So our variable is v, and we need to figure out, we need to make them equal. So when are these two plans the same amount of money? Well, we know that an unlimited use is 70 per month, so we're going to say we're going to have to balance this one, and we have to balance this one. Well, if we have to balance the first one, let's just write down 70. That's the first half. And we need to balance it with this second half. $10 fee plus $5 per visit. And remember, whenever you see that word per, you're multiplying. So it's going to be $10 plus this $5 per visit. So multiply this per visit, and it says visits right here is V. So 5 times V. So that is the equation to solve. And you'll notice that this question doesn't actually ask you to solve this equation. So we're done. Once you enter the equation, you're done. If you did have to solve, you subtract 10 and then divide by 5. But that's how to find the equation. All right, number 14, you've seen this problem almost before exactly, so go ahead and pause the video now, see if you can do it. All right, you've unpaused the video. So a solution to the equation is a fancy way of saying which of these points is on the line. Okay, so which of these points is on the line? Let's go ahead and graph them. So -4, 4. -4, +4. That's this point right there. Well, that's clearly not on the line. Let's graph -2, 0. -2, 0 is right there. No, that one's on the line. There's the answer. Let's graph -2, 4 just to make sure we didn't mess up. -2, 4 is right there. That's not it. What about 4, 0? 4, 0 is right there. Yep, this was the only one on the line. So the correct answer is B. And then finally, we have number 15. So number 15 is another one of those problems that we haven't learned yet. So you're done watching the video now, unless you want to learn how to do this one to get it correct and see if we can beat Colville, I guess. So analyzing this problem, what do the S of n even mean? So S of n, that's a little bit too fast, too sloppy. S of n is, we'll just say that's each term. That's the one that we're looking for. What is S of n minus 1? That's the previous term. Previous term. And then that's supposed to be an E there. And then S of n minus 2. So even going back one farther, it's the term before the previous term. So term before previous term. For example, just to make sense of this, if I have the numbers 1, 2, and 3, this is the term that I'm currently looking for. That is S of n. So right here we have S of n. The term before that is S of n minus 1. The term before that is S of n minus 2. The term before that is S of n minus 3, and it just goes backwards forever. So that's just kind of a visual way to see it. All right, so now let's use this to analyze this problem. It says each term after the second is created. After the second just means n is greater than 2. Where does it say that? N is greater than 2. So don't worry about after the second. So each term is created by S of n. Each term is created by doing what? You have to subtract the term before the previous term from. So we don't know what we're subtracting from, but we know that we're going to be subtracting S of n minus 2. Because it's saying subtracting the term before the previous term from. That's all I'm looking at. We don't know what we're subtracting from yet, but we know that we are going to be subtracting S of n minus 2, the term before the previous term. And then what are we going to be subtracting from? Well, the answer is the very next line. From twice the previous term. So twice the previous term, well, here's the previous term, S of n minus 1, and we need to do twice of that, so 2 times this. So this can be 2 times S of n minus 1. So where is our answer? It looks like S of n is equal to this guy, which is D. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. I know that was a long video, and that will get you ready for the benchmark. If you have any free time after this video, go ahead and work on that practice final number 2, which is optional.